Let's take a look at the lead developer role in an IT team. So here is where the lead developer shows up in the hierarchy, basically the organizational diagram of the IT team, the role diagram. And you can see that the lead developer is connected to the solution architect here and to the developers here. So the lead developer is basically the leader of the development team. This can be a formal role where the organization has specifically designated one developer to be lead. The job is often called lead dev or team lead. You often hear it being referred to as team lead. Or it could be an informal role where the group of developers have no formal leader, but amongst themselves they have elevated their most senior developer into a de facto leadership role. In both cases, it's basically the same thing in both cases. There is a lead developer, and this person needs to take on the responsibilities of the lead dev role. So what are those responsibilities? The lead developer receives the architecture design, the architecture specification from the solution architect. So the solution architect right here passes the design, the architecture design of the solution to be built, and passes it on to the lead developer. Now the responsibility of the lead developer is to implement this design. Remember, the architecture design contains no code. It's a high-level description of what needs to be built. So the lead developer takes this design and implements it, writes all the code required to implement the architecture. And of course there's a whole team of developers. So basically what the lead developer does is take these tasks, these coding tasks that need to be done, split them up in manageable blocks, and then assign these blocks to individual developers. So the easy stuff goes to the junior devs, and the difficult coding task goes to the senior developers. And if the nice tasks, the fun assignments go to the lead developer. So let's take a look at the responsibilities of the lead developer role. The primary responsibility, it's called lead developer, but the most important responsibility is to lead and mentor the other developers. So lead and mentor. The lead developer is basically in charge of the entire team and is responsible for making sure that all the other developers are productive. So that means assigning the correct tasks to the correct developer, making sure that the juniors get the easy stuff and the seniors get the hard stuff, and not the other way around. Performing code reviews, reviewing all code that is being written to make sure it's up to standard. Mentor developers. So when developers are struggling with a design pattern or with a specific coding assignment, make sure that they succeed. Train developers, point them to online resources to fill gaps in their knowledge, and basically make sure that everything is running smoothly. So we've talked about assigning tasks to developers. The lead developer takes the work that needs to be done. If the team uses Scrum, then in the current sprint, the lead developer would take the work that needs to be done and chop it up and give the assignments to the software developers and give the correct task to the correct developer. So that also includes partitioning work, taking tasks that need to be done and partitioning them into micro tasks and assigning those. And here we go. I think this is the most important one, the last one. Ensure that all developers are successful. I like to formulate it this way. The lead developer, the main role of the lead developer is to make sure that the entire team is successful. Quite often you see lead developers being backed up by a weak development team, and in such a scenario the lead developer would take all the complicated tasks and give the really easy stuff to the team, And so the team is not really successful. It's just the lead dev who's successful and not the team. This doesn't really work. It doesn't scale. You can't really do a lot of work if only one person is implementing the complicated stuff. So to really be successful as a lead developer, your entire team needs to be up to par. So your role as lead dev is not really a coding role. It's more like a training and mentoring role. And you have your thumb on the pulse of all the developers. You know exactly what's going on within the team. It's much more a management role than you might think. So when looking at the skills of a lead developer, I'll start with what I think is the most important skill. It's right here, the mentoring skills. So you need to be able to mentor your team to make sure that everybody on your team is successful. You need to know who is the junior developer and who is the senior developer. And you need to have like a mentorship program in your mind where you can point your junior devs to the right online resources and coach them to improve. I mean, ideally, you start out with, say, you have one senior dev and a couple of junior devs. Ideally, they all end up being senior because of your awesome mentoring skills. So that is basically your challenge as a lead dev, to elevate your entire team to a higher level. So mentoring skills are super important. Obviously, you need programming skills. Now, interesting thing, coding as a lead developer is optional. You don't actually have to code. You can be a successful lead developer and not code and assign all coding tasks to your team. But of course, you need to have programming skills because you're doing the code reviews. So you need to understand if code is good or not. So a lead developer has awesome programming skills. Finally, look at this one. You need to be, my arrows are terrible. You need to be values driven. A good lead developer is really fascinated by code. A good lead developer understands that elegance is an important attribute of code. A good lead developer recognizes elegant code. A good lead developer appreciates reusable code. A good lead developer appreciates efficient code. So these are all values, coding values, technical values. A good lead developer is value driven, is driven to incorporate these important values in their own code and to mentor and coach their entire team so that the team produces code with these values also in place. So you really need to be value driven. You need to understand the importance of elegance. So a couple of additional observations, a couple of additional skills required for the lead developer role. Lead developer grows out of developer. As I said, you can be a formal lead developer assigned by a company, or a team grants you the authority to be lead developer. So you kind of naturally grow from developer to being lead developer. A lead developer needs to have a great relationship with the architect, because the architect does the high-level technical stuff and the lead developer does the implementation stuff. But you're looking at the same thing. You're both looking at the technical specifications. As lead dev, you're completely focused on implementation. The architect is completely focused on high-level overall business architecture. But it's just two perspectives of the same thing. So for a harmonious cooperation between these two roles, you need to have a really good personal relationship with the architect. You need to have a wide knowledge of libraries and tools. You need to be adept at creating specifications because you need to tell your development team what to do. So every week you are writing specifications to describe the tasks that need to be done. So you're going to do a lot of this bit. You need to be adept at build and configuration management. There is a separate role for that. I mean, we have the deployment manager as a separate role, but in all the teams that I've seen in my career, the build and configuration management starts with the lead developer and then is gradually handed over to the deployment manager. But it always starts with the lead dev. So you need to be skilled at build and configuration management, because you will be expected to build the first iteration of that build platform. So that would be this skill. You need to be adept at debugging, log inspection and post-mortem debugging, because when the solution goes to production and it crashes, people are going to come to your desk and ask you to debug and find the cause of the exception. And quite often it will be a null reference exception with a weird stack trace, and you'll have no idea where the error is. So you're going to have to do some kind of debugging or some kind of log inspection. And people will expect you to be really adept at that. But just you whip out your debugger, you look at the production system, and within 5 minutes you know exactly where the bug is. I know I had that with my own code for years. As a good lead developer, you need to have that skill as well. And finally, you need to be able to create your own tools. If the tools that you need are not in Visual Studio or they're not in the open source community, you're expected to just whip out your own tools. Like create an MS Build step. There's a missing MS Build step and you need to add one. You're expected to be able to build those things yourself. So again, an important skill for the lead developer. Okay, finally, let's look at some pros and cons. What are the pros and cons of being a lead developer? Pros, it's a lead-in to the solution architect. To become a solution architect, first you have to become a lead developer. So it's on the career path towards the architect. It involves coding. It's the highest possible role you can have in an organization and still code. Coding is optional at this level. You can choose not to code. But if coding is really important to you, then lead developer is as high as you can go. And you get to pick and choose your own tasks. You can give all the boring stuff to your team and do all the nice stuff yourself, if you want. Then the cons, you can get squeezed between the solution architects and the developers. If there is an issue with the architecture, if you and the architect create this beautiful architecture implementation and the developers are unable to implement it, then you will get squeezed between your developers and the architect. So you're going to need some people management skills to resolve that if it happens. You're going to have to do lifelong learning to keep up to speed, because you're expected to know a lot of libraries and platforms and technical specs and patterns and practices and you name what. So prepare for lifelong learning. When the project manager is weak, the role turns into a regular developer. So it sounds nice on paper to be lead developer, but if you get squeezed in the planning, because the planning is unrealistic, then there's going to be no time for coaching, there's no time for mentoring, there's no time for testing, and you're just a developer again. So that can happen. And the team might be too small. You might get challenging implementation requests and only a tiny team, and you're not really in a position to do anything about that. So that can suck. And it's vulnerable to offshoring. Developers are already being offshored to countries with cheap wages. Lead developer is next. So it's kind of a dangerous role to be in. If you're lead dev, you might want to think about ascending the corporate ladder to architect as soon as you can, because the lead developer role is getting outsourced more and more. So that was the lead developer in a nutshell.